Dear human being, beloved soul, I welcome you to my podcast series, Conversations with the Universe. After a near-death experience, my perception of our human existence changed profoundly. I became more sensitive, with all our known senses. I feel more intensely, see people with different eyes, and often take a different perspective on life and our challenges. In my books, I share these altered perspectives and all the knowledge that has flowed through me since my near death and thus record it. For all those who are searching for something more, for the meaning of our existence here on Mother Earth. And it is now a great pleasure for me to share this knowledge with you in this way as a supplement to my books. This season I am dedicating myself to my very first work, the basics of being. I wish you many wonderful insights on your path. Thank you. Love.
First, a quick note about my network, SPINE. This is short for the Spiritual Network and is the first global social media network for holistic knowledge, awareness, spirituality, and above all, a bridge between providers and seekers. I invite you to join us and connect with me there. Feel free to look around, find lots of podcasts, events, healers, but above all, lots of inspiration to grow. It's free. But now let's start with today's episode. One of the greatest mysteries for every human being is death. But as always, mysteries and miracles are only an indication that there is not enough information available on a particular topic. Life is a wonderful opportunity for us to obtain this information, understand it, and use it. So you have the option of taking all the words here seriously, but you can just as easily choose not to. Nothing will happen to you. It is an experiment whose scope you alone determine. Some will remember these words during the dying process and thus direct their consciousness, while others will remember them less. Aware of this opportunity, I would therefore like to briefly outline here how, over the years, I have learned the principle of this transition through contact with various beings from different levels. Here too, it is my perception that I am communicating to you and thus sharing with you. It does not have to correspond to your perception, but it can and should serve solely to prepare your mind as flexibly and your heart as openly as possible for the state of transition. When the part of the soul that incarnated as a human being leaves the body, a phase of discovery begins. Parts of the soul that may have been lost in the course of life are called upon to leave this gross material plane together. Some ancient writings refer to 47 days, others to 49, 52, or even more than 100 days of an interim period during which certain rules must be observed. Some cultures read from ancient books of the dead during this phase, while others simply leave the dead body to rest in certain places until a certain period of time has elapsed. However, it is not my goal here to list the rituals, which would fill further books, but only to illustrate the fact that there is a kind of transition phase in which the soul energy of the recently incarnated being lingers in an intermediate world. You know the law of purification. Every energy experiences various forms of contamination during the journey of the soul. Thus, at the end of a phase of incarnation, there is always the purification of earthly energies and other impurities. Therefore, this intermediate world is also referred to as the world of purification, world of clarification, or world of discovery. In the Bible, this state is mentioned in the form of purgatory. In this essentially non-judgmental state, reflection takes place on experiences, deeds, actions, and omissions. Memories are still fresh, life is still close, and the soul must adjust to the new perception, as if in a kind of lock. Suddenly, the consciousness gained so far determines perception, and all this in a different frequency range from whose vibrations connection is suddenly felt instead of separation. All this requires an adjustment, a preparatory phase. You can imagine it like a butterfly that was previously a caterpillar. Suddenly, the energy no longer has an organic body, and yet it still knows everything it has experienced. All sensations, all thoughts are stored in consciousness. And suddenly this consciousness experiences a completely different world. The butterfly tries to move its body like a caterpillar with its feet and realizes that this is no longer possible. The body suddenly feels different. And what are these wings? This intermediate phase, in which one notices what is now different, is the phase of purification, in which what has been experienced and created in ego consciousness is viewed again from a different perspective. Some soul energy lingers in this plane for a very long time, perhaps even eternally, according to our sense of time. This happens especially when the person has not learned to let go of the material world, when they have not trained their mind to be open and flexible to other perspectives and worlds. But often it is also fear that holds back consciousness. Yet fear only arises where information is lacking. Therefore, perhaps with these lines, I can contribute to overcoming these fears. However, many experience this process relatively unconsciously and, embedded in the cosmic laws, simply let it happen to them. Once the time of purification is complete and the chains of the organism have all been cast off, the soul energy exists in its corresponding consciousness. If this consciousness is broad, flexible, and powerful, one of the upper frequency ranges will now be the home of this energy for an indefinite period of time. If the energy still identifies very strongly with earthly, material, and rigid things, it will only perceive the lower levels of subtlety. Thus, the energies that did not become aware of the connection through identification with the ego, or even forgot these connections, remain in the dark part of the first energy world. Others have experienced during their lifetime that there is a light world of the deceased and remain there in this part of the first energy world. Still others have lived their lives so consciously connected to themselves, to living beings, and thus to the source that, by virtue of the high vibration of their spirit, they immediately enter another, higher vibrating level after the purification phase. How far and flexibly the muscle of consciousness has been trained and remembered during perception, in matter, in life, is decisive for where the soul part then goes. As you know, there are 7 subtly higher vibrating planes, which the Mayans, for example, referred to as the 7 upper heavens. In the lower part of the first energy world is the dark realm, which is further subdivided into 7 subtly lower vibrating planes, the 7 lower heavens. However, I do not wish to describe these in more detail, as it is not relevant how exactly they are structured, and I am not prepared to direct my perception there. It is actually irrelevant what exactly happens there. The only thing that should be important to you is that these areas exist and which components are decisive for landing there. It is exclusively the forgetting of the connection that drives the energies there. And the big question remains, how do such energies manage to remember the connection again? You have experienced how essential, driving, motivating, and ultimately moving the curiosity of souls is, the interest in wanting to experience. It is this force that moves energies into the experience of ego consciousness, allowing us to grow and become. And where the deepest forgetfulness reigns, the driving clockwise force of curiosity turns into a counterclockwise, accelerating force of longing. Like an invisible rubber band that goes in one direction into ego consciousness and the other drives the return home. Both are always part of a process, the wholeness of all being. All energies are always connected to the source, but their consciousness can forget this connection. And that is exactly what happens to these energies when they end up in the darker planes. They are connected, but they have forgotten that. Not just a little, but almost completely. And that is precisely the opportunity for the forgotten souls of the dark part of the first level. For no soul can be without the conscious connection. This is equivalent to the feeling of being absolutely loved by no one and loving no one on earth. The soul becomes ill in this state. Whether on earth or there, it suffers, it experiences the state of having forgotten itself for so long and so painfully, until the memory, i.e., the longing for a different, less tormented, more fulfilling existence, is consciously experienced within it, so that the desire to achieve a better state can be formed. And with that, the decisive impulse is given to move from the dark to the lighter part. It is exclusively one's own impulse, the desire to move, that turns consciousness around. And so, of course, it is also possible for the energy to formulate the desire to incarnate again as a human being. Such an energy now begins to move into gross matter due to the impulse of longing for something better, but it is still far from becoming aware of its connection with everything. The impulse alone is sufficient to herald ego consciousness, i.e., incarnation. However, this impulse is not capable of further training of consciousness. Such unconscious energies will therefore experience a different life than would be the case with a soul that is conscious of itself and its connection. Even without incarnating into an organism, an energy can form the will to move strongly enough in the dark part of the first energy world. But as we know, real expansion of consciousness is only possible through experience in gross matter. In any case, however, incarnation is only a continuation of the soul's existing state of consciousness. However, as you know, the diversity of experiences in matter can immensely accelerate the process of remembering. The goal is and always remains to fulfill knowledge through experience, to discover and develop creative power, to become aware of the connection of all being in all of this, and to experience it in various ways. The discovery of the forgetting of the connection is therefore part of the journey of the souls and should therefore not be judged in any way. All people are connected to the source because their souls dwell there. The part that dwells within you in order to immerse itself and explore in solid matter, what cannot be experienced in the subtle realm, will always be connected to your soul and thus to the source. It is up to you how aware you are or will become of this connection. So start today. For example, if a person has not undergone any training in consciousness during their life and has not trained their muscle of consciousness, it may be that they can perceive in a bright frequency range in the first energy level, but that fears, immobility, and powerlessness are the reasons why their energy will remain there for a long time. Quite simply, because this energy has not become aware of all the possibilities for movement in these worlds and therefore cannot move beyond the vibration of its field. It is consciousness alone that moves energy. So energy is bound to the elasticity of consciousness. Just as there are energy units in the cosmos that can move anywhere and penetrate everything due to their agility, there are other particles that cannot do so. Let's take the aggregate state of the elements as an example. If an element is cooled to many degrees below zero, the particles in it vibrate much more slowly than they do in the normal state of the element. It is similar with consciousness. If a person has not managed to shape, direct, and make flexible the movement of the particles of their energy through their consciousness, they will remain in a different frequency world as a more rigid consciousness than an energy that has already brought the diversity of subtlety into its consciousness. Allowing your consciousness to become immobile happens primarily because you have forgotten the connection to the source. And forgetting the connection means becoming immobile in consciousness. Like particles that simply receive too little energy, the mobility of your energy cools, solidifies, and freezes. Consciousness is the connection of all being with each other, and only through consciousness can the connection with the source be experienced. Thus, it is exclusively the state of your mind, your mobility, your openness, your breadth, and the amount of knowledge you have experienced that determine where, in which worlds, you will dwell after your death. Conclusion. Becoming aware of the connection with the source of all being means recognizing the source. Experiencing life and being with it is different than without this connection. The clearer you become, the clearer you recognize who you really are, the more clearly you will realize that everything is possible within you. You can determine what you focus your attention on, so you can also use this power to determine where you ultimately want to be with your soul after the death of your physical body. You have access to all levels, can resonate with them. Enter and immerse yourself in order to be there. Becoming aware of the wholeness of all being is the result of this path. Thank you again for your attention, and I look forward to next time. Thank you. Love. If you would like to delve deeper into the subject of birth and death, I recommend my Initiation into Birth and Death as a book or podcast series. And I would like to remind you to join our community Spine. We are a community that wants to help you live a healthier life, practice your spirituality, and expand your consciousness. We help you find and connect with healers around the world, and we help you give your life a new meaning in different ways. We are Spine, connections that help.